Article 4 when we adjourned last week,
Yeah, I think it'd be
or
cold,
a
so I
month ago.
can't see.
A long time. Lots have happened since then. So, I guess the question is, does anybody have any comments about where we left off, or does anyone have anything that they want to add to our discussions on Article 4, which was council?
Have we gotten through council? I thought we just gotten through like the mayor's part of it.
Yeah.
All right,
I don't
so we
think we
got
touched that.
all right, okay.
Could I, just start with the reports of Ashley and then tell you what's going on with this little form here?
Sure.
All right. So, created a form to put on our website, and I sent it to the webmaster, but my outgoing mail has not gotten to many places. But this is the form that will be on the website when it is up. Randy has had it for a while now. It's coming up. You'll be able to click, 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 and submit, submit, submit. If that is, it happens, there's a little paragraph about the charter in progress, and it has all your names, so you can also send it to you if that's what they desire. And the last meeting, Mr. Milstein's provided a resolution that Ms. Dara was going to have Mr. Engel ask me to put something together, which I did, relative to this and comparing to make sure that when the ballot language was, the language on the ballot was consistent with the revisions that were made. And if you will see through here that there are only 3 references to fractions in the current charter. You know, this all became effective 2014. So the top 3 are just the 3 references. The next part is only the references to the word 3. The next part is the references to the word 4, which you will see consumes every part of the removal process. If you go back to page 1, the 3rd paragraph down, under removing of the building commissioner, that was the only fraction that remained, and I believe that was an oversight. That being said, I also think Peggy had referenced 413 council removal where they refer to still 5 remaining, and I believe that was an oversight as well, because clearly everything else was fixed appropriately.
Which ones were those sections? Yeah, no,
No, I don't know what an oversight, what you mean by it was an oversight.
I believe, well, because when the charter amendment, when the council reduction to 5, the charter language, the ballot language said, reducing the number of councils to 5 and making all appropriate adjustments thereto or something like that. So in other words,
every single section was not itemized.
exactly.
It was more generalized, and
Exactly.
it just never got changed.
That's
So-
what I believe, but we can't make that assumption. But I also think that 413, which I've highlighted in gray just to make it a little easier, is also the oversight. So the document that I believe that was being used in 2012, was an older one, and so now you have some references in how to deal with the fractions if you moving forward.
So, then,
Oh, the 5/5 is still 4. So.
yeah, I'm just wondering that if the removal of council member is, would that be then 3 of the 5?
That would be the
Have to
4.
be 3.
Yeah, it would have to be, yeah. It would just go down 1.
Would have to be 3.
I mean, that's the
Yeah.
majority.
Right. Because you can't vote on yourself.
You can't vote on
And so there'd be
yourself.
4 left, and if you had 4 out of 5, that would be 100%, and you
Right.
can't ever do that,
That's right.
so it'd have to be 3. That's what
My
I know.
point was simply that we consider making it consistent across the board, regardless of whether it was an oversight or fractions or 3s or 4s.
And I think
just
that's what
keep it
Mr.
consistent.
Engel then said. He said that you can make any fraction of a whole number. He said that also in yours. In those minutes, so.
I guess I'm wondering, do we have meetings from the last?
You do, they're not edited, that's what I was just reading. They're not edited, and I'll embarrass myself by showing, but I was actually reading aloud what you had said and that what subsequent Mr. Engel had asked me to make a report. Nobody has them, they're not edited.
Haven't opened a meeting yet, so I should just be quiet.
we just were reports and I was fulfilling my report obligation.
I'm not familiar with how we do minutes.
Yeah, I'll circulate them and then
That's
you'll
what
look
she
at them
said.
and,
Okay, so you'll circulate these before the next meeting then?
yeah, this would be probably before, I mean,
I
they're
know.
not edited and I'll embarrass myself when I see double letters.
Okay.
It's been,
That's fine.
Okay, have we formally started the meeting?
I think
guess?
you did, yes.
Yeah, I
Okay, I
said, yeah.
apologize, I
No,
guess I
that's
didn't
fine.
realize that.
No, I threw in that, the reports is always the beginning, so, and I wanted to make sure you knew about that.
Could I ask another question? Shoot. Organizational stuff, I guess, or make a request. I guess the request would be that we find a way to get the minutes for the meeting at least 24 hours before the meeting.
You
So
know,
we
I would
have a
love to
chance
say
to
that's
review.
going to happen, but I will tell you right now that maybe not.
Okay.
Why is that?
Well, to me, this,
Because I'm dancing as fast as I can.
I
That is a
would've-
report,
yeah.
that's not the minutes.
okay, but I
that's a
would have
report.
preferred that the minutes took
You know what,
priority
Mr.
over this,
Milstein?
so.
I'm dancing as fast as I can.
I'm not,
Well,
I'm
I'm
not
telling you.
suggesting you did anything wrong.
I didn't say
I'm
that you
making
did,
a
I'm saying to
request.
you,
Yeah.
I understand that request. Is it
Yeah.
possible? Yes. Is it gonna happen? I don't know.
Well, I think
I think
as a
particularly-
political body, we need to see minutes before we, before we vote on them and approve them. I don't think it's
We're not
acceptable, 15
doing any
minutes
of that yet.
before.
These minutes are not, you're not acting on anything yet.
All right, I understand what David's saying, I understand what Josephine's saying, and I also know that when we have the tight turnaround a week apart, those minutes are gonna be more and more difficult, so we'll try to work on those in the future. I think what we, are doing at this point in time are just trying to, point those areas out where we think we need to have a second look, and that's where we're at. I think I just also point out that Josephine had sent us 3 charters from 3 communities, Hudson, Twinsburg, and Brecksville. So, and if you need them hard copies, let us know. All right, so, any other preliminary things before we get going? Yes.
We had asked if any of the other department heads would like to address. I know Tim was here. Did you
Yeah.
like say anything? You've sent that invitation and no one has.
No,
That's just checking.
We've all
Not
been
even,
invited.
That's right.
RSVP, like, I don't really wanna be there, nothing,
We get that.
so.
No.
I'm sure they're busy working on
I'm sure
other
there's much
things.
better TV on Wednesday.
I can't remember what it is, but yes, you're probably right. All right, so, let's try to pick up where we were at in council. Josephine, do you have a recollection of how far we had gotten down council, maybe
That highlighted thing that you.
you were working off of, yeah.
I remember that was David Ron.
That's my concern.
Remember, that's the reason we did that,
Right.
with,
That's right,
him.
exactly,
Mhm.
exactly.
But I definitely don't agree with it, I'd like to see it changed back, but, that's why we
We've
did
gone
it.
through the vacancy.
You know, sometimes
Special
there's
election.
Exactly.
you ask for something.
And it really got done for, unless
That's
you
who
had
it was,
anybody else,
and
like,
she
you weren't
certainly
really going,
wasn't
you were going
worth
around the
fighting
table.
All right, who had not talked? That's right, and we're not gonna do it the same way we did. All right, say where do you think we were?
Oh, you were back to, you were still with special election, then you got down to vacancy.
Okay, what section? Oh, section 12, is that what you're saying?
No, we were still before.
That's what I'm trying to figure out, what section.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Or give me
What
a
line, you have a
Give me a
line
line.
number?
Yeah, I did, I had 277, you were still talking about special elections.
Okay. All right, that's good enough.
One thing that is so generic, and it's, I hope that the law department would allow us to make a change, just in, take out the reference to councilman, which is in throughout the charter, and say council member, or just council, make it more gender neutral.
Okay.
And so if we could make that request to the, council whatever, not man.
Council person.
or member, or just council.
Well, then you wanna change 101, I mean 103?
I know
It's a
throughout,
gender.
I know it's throughout, because like, even in line, like 278, 279, 291, 293, 294, I mean, you can just make it generic, I don't think it has to even go to the voters, I think it just,
I don't think you can, because it says right here, as used in this charter, the masculine and feminine gender shall be each to be deemed to be include the others with a context, so don't you have to change that?
I don't know, ask Joe how he wants to handle it.
So, you're,
It just seems so
Josephine's grant.
outdated, but anyway, just a thought,
I'll send an email.
no big deal.
So would that be 103 gender?
well, obviously it was in 1984.
Yeah, so-
We obviously addressed it, must have been something at that time.
I know, we all know what it means. It doesn't matter if it's a woman or a man, we all know that. But it just makes sense to change it, but,
No, I agree with you. I think to make it generic is probably a better thing.
Okay. All right, I'll send Joe Ebert an email on that. Just have something to go on that.
I definitely don't want it to go to the voters, because I don't think it's worth putting it on the ballot.
That may be difficult because.
Well, unless,
See, I wanted to change the word village out of there, because it's like in there, and to me, that's it, and he told me.
and he said we can.
Well, Mike Kelly told me, I said, Mike, can't you just change the, out of there? He said, he
It
can't.
has to be voted on.
It still goes back for my, I said the same thing.
You mean the name?
No, in a couple times you'll see the word
village, yeah.
village.
They reference village as opposed to city a number of times within the charter. And I think that should be removed, because we're no longer a village, we're a city, and that should probably be changed.
And the thing is, it has to go to the voters to be voted on for the language to change.
Yeah,
That's
the
just the
voters.
laws.
All right, Josephine, why don't you can you track down the times where it says village? I don't know if you have those.
Yeah, it's searchable. Yeah.
Searchable, yeah, search village. And maybe we'll get working on those two. I think everybody agrees on these issues. Okay, all right, I'll send them to Joe and try to get, all right. All right, so I do remember that we were talking about the special election issues that came up a couple years ago, I guess it was. So we were talking about.
Yeah. And, you also, being absent of things, the technology, some important things here. Legal defense, sort of brought that up and all that other stuff. We talked about, what's the word I wanna use? Not office manager,
City manager.
city manager.
Right, that was an issue in.
Chief of staff.
Chief
Oh,
of
chief
staff.
of staff, that's who it was, thank you.
We had talked, or Josephine had talked about in the past that people have come, we've had presenters, and it would seem to me that that might be an area that we're interested in. And so before I go further with that, are you interested in having a presentation from maybe like Talmadge or one of the other cities that have either a chief of staff, I guess? or
Well,
one
chief of
the-
staff is much different than a city manager.
Right, well, I was thinking we would wanna have both presentations. Or is that something you're interested in having one night?
Is the chief of staff an assistant to the mayor?
The chief of staff would be an assistant to the mayor. Chief of staff could not be removed by council, but the chief of staff would be a more professional person who would have more training experience in running a city than the normal elected mayor might.
I think the big issue is a city manager or true city manager. You go with the city manager form of government, you have a weak council, or weak mayor, council appoints that city manager, like a Hudson or Brunswick. In a chief of staff, you give the chief of staff authority based on your charter. You still technically have a strong mayor because the mayor appoints that chief of staff. And you still have a stronger mayor than a council, but you could appoint that person to have certain budgetary requirements or be the appointing authority for hiring and firing, et cetera, how much power you wanted to give that person based on qualifications. You know, you couldn't just put anybody in there, they'd have to have certain qualifications. Two different models, but if we did decide to do that, and I don't know, we have time, you know, in this process, certainly would change almost everything we're talking about. So if we're going to think along those lines, we have to do it sooner than later.
Right.
If you have a chief of staff to the mayor, if that chief of staff, the mayor nominates, council approves?
No.
Okay, so the mayor can appoint anybody
And I
now?
shouldn't say no so fast. It could be any way we formulate
No,
it,
disagree.
but generally, no, because the mayor is still the head, the legislative, you know, and head of the city.
Mhm.
But it's any way we wanna set it up and propose to set it up to the voters, so it could be any way.
No, the reason I'm saying that, if nobody has the right, whether it's council or voters, the mayor can appoint his uncle or his aunt or his niece.
No, he could if they're qualified,
No,
but we
that's
have
not
to
gonna
also
happen.
have nepotism rules and all
Yeah,
that
Oh,
other
yeah, that's what
stuff.
I'm saying.
But they have to be, that's the thing is, you have to have, let's say, 4 to 6 years of, municipal government
That's my point.
experience or.
Is that gonna be in the charter?
Yes, that's
Okay.
what it is in town.
So
It
if
could be.
If I understand what you're suggesting is if we were to put together something proposing that, it would have to also include like a position description or qualifications. To
Qualifications.
ensure that, yeah.
Right. That's what I think it was in 5 years' experience in governmental, a master's degree in public administration or safety services or public safety or, you know, really specific qualifications.
All right, if he is what we say he is, and the mayor is for some reason in China somewhere, does he run the city?
And that's how we set it up. It's how we set
Then
this
I
up.
agree,
It could
Peggy,
be
but
any way
then
we want.
we're gonna have to change it to say that when the mayor's out of town or indisposed, council president is acting mayor. That's gonna have to change this whole charter again. It's a mess.
Well,
Well, I
it
think,
doesn't have to
that would
change
be a
like
mess.
that.
I think what would happen would be is that, you know, the transfer of power would be, in the event that the mayor isn't there, then the dictates would come from the president of council as opposed to the mayor, that's all. I mean, it wouldn't really
So
change
we
the
have to
charter.
make sure that this other appointment doesn't have the responsibility when the mayor's gone.
No, I think it's, the dictates of that are already in the charter, so I think that when the mayor's absent, the president of council takes over, they can dictate to that individual who may be the chief of staff at that point, what needs to be done, if there's something that needs to be done. Somebody has to be, there's a check and balance system here, and that's the check and balance in my mind.
So whatever their title would be, essentially they're functioning as a department director, like other department directors, without a staff, you know.
A little bit more than that.
I mean,
In
I
the-
guess that
in
was
the
where I was
Shaker
going, was the
example.
question, would the department directors then become responsible organizationally to that individual?
Yes.
Or still to the mayor?
In the Shaker and Talmadge example, the department directors answer to that person. But the bigger question is too, is the safety director, do we, and that's a question I wanna discuss, is right now, mayor serves as safety director, but it doesn't have to be that. It could change, it could be an independent person, it could be that person, could be whoever. So it depends on however you wanna set it up, whatever works. I don't think I don't think dramatic change is gonna happen with our voters, our residents don't seem to want dramatic change. I think incremental change, as long as we show improvement. So I think keeping the structure that we have, that they're used to, is good, and then making some independent changes, you know, as we go forward is probably better than taking from what we have to a pure city manager form of government is probably not gonna get approved by the voters, I'm guessing, just because it's a pretty dramatic change.
The Talmadge and Shaker that you alluded to, is theirs chief of staff, is that the title, or
The
chief
title is Director of Administration.
Director of Administration? And that pay grade is commensurate with the other department heads or
I
slightly above?
I
Oh,
have
you
no
don't?
idea. When I was and I'll give you an example at Copley, when I was a township administrator, I was in charge, I supervised the police chief and the fire chief. And all the department heads and everyone answered to me, and then I answered to the trustees. I was hired and fired by the trustees. Salary was set by the trustees, not by me. We had a collective bargaining agreement with the employees, but of course in the township there was no civil service. And the trustees served as safety director. I don't know if that helps, but it's similar.
Well, and then the director of administration, as you just identified, is that also commensurate in terms of salary with a city manager or not? Not the city, because.
Generally, a city manager would make a lot more money
That's what I
than a
thought, yeah.
director of administration.
Okay.
Generally, I just saw it on the website, I was looking at Dublin, just this week, Dublin, which is a pretty
Well, it's a big
progressive
city, yeah. And that's all the
city.
community, like,
Yeah,
like that.
I know, but
Yeah.
I'm just saying, Dublin just hired a new city manager January 5th, appointed the person, and had been with the city for 26 years in different capacities and moved up to the city manager. They're paying him $195,000. But that's a lot bigger city than we are, obviously. So, anyway.
So I guess, does anybody have any thoughts about wanting to have the director of administration come and talk to us or not? I see some say no.
Well, having sat in that seat as mayor, a chief of staff is a very simple, in my mind, thought of putting somebody in place. I don't know what they're gonna tell me that I wouldn't know.
Okay.
I mean, unless somebody else needs to have that information. So from my standpoint, unless somebody else needs it, I just feel that when the idea or the thought had been presented, manager versus chief of staff, I can accept a chief of staff in my mind, because that's a good thing. Say, going to a city manager proposition in my mind is not a good thing.
Right. Okay. So I guess the idea of having someone come in and talk to us doesn't sound like people are interested. Okay, then we'll move on. Yes, David?
Just to discuss this just a little bit more, I'm looking at, I guess it would be starting with line 198, the mayor's duties and powers currently. Talking about a position like chief of staff, essentially what we're talking about is having some of those shed by the mayor and move to a chief of staff's role. Is that what I'm understanding to be what we're talking about? So the chief of staff would become the supervisor, like for line 202 and 203, supervise the affairs and have control of the departments.
I think when we did the town's charter, is what we kind of did is left it on the vague side. That saying, we don't know who's gonna be the mayor. It doesn't matter who the mayor is, because just like everybody else in everybody else's position, everybody has strengths and weaknesses. There's no one person gonna be elected mayor here that's gonna have all the skills needed to run a city, just not practical. So if the person who gets elected maybe was a retired police chief, he's gonna have experience in the safety forces, but he may not have experience in a budgetary process. So if the mayor was a smart mayor, he would hire somebody who would have some strengths where he had weaknesses. The same thing if he was a retired or a former finance director, but wasn't strong in safety forces, maybe a retired police chief would be a good director of administration in that city. So we left it really vague. The mayor didn't really lose any responsibility, but we did require, the charter does require him to hire a person to serve in his stead, to assist him in the budgetary process, in the supervisory process, contracts, et cetera, all the jobs that he has here. Still had responsibility based on what he currently had, but just to make sure that it ensured somebody with some professional experience would be at the helm of the city.
Well, in all the other cases, the charter has defined the responsibilities and powers of each of those positions. Law director, service director, finance director. So I guess all I'm saying is that we're looking at putting language together to do something like that, which I think is a good idea to consider. It's, you know, we're gonna need to go a little further and define what that role is actually gonna be, what his duties and powers are, just like the other individual sections. You know, each section of this charter is structured by, identifies the position, qualifications, duties and powers, and then how to remove them from office, I think, is usually the last thing in each one of them. So we would have to do the same type of thing, wouldn't we, if we define this position
You could.
as well?
Well, I think if we get to the point where we agree that we are thinking that we should have a chief of staff, then I think we should put a description together similar to what we have done for all of the other departments. I agree.
My question is, why do we need it in the first place, the way this government is run right now? I mean, to me, that group was here, I've got them all, why do we have to add an extra person? For what? What, is it gonna improve the city? I don't think so.
I'm not
Well,
sure
what I
I
think-
agree with you.
Chuck, here's what I think, and I think their points are well taken, and I can say this because I served in that position for a long time. I mean, not every who's elected, or person that's elected, walking into the mayor's position is going to have the overall knowledge of how to operate a city.
But Joe, you've had all your department heads, right?
Truly,
All right. You got to depend on, if you are elected mayor and don't know nothing, and you know you got a finance director, you want to appoint me, but I can't get appointed until council checks me out. There's your safety guards. See what I'm saying?
Here's another aspect of that, is that you never want the tail to wag the dog, okay? So you want your mayor and your staff, chief of staff, to be able to govern the administration as they're supposed to. And I say this because I know that this could happen, is that directors could be very strong and possibly steer the system as they would want to steer the system. I mean, that could happen.
Other
I'm not
than the mayor,
suggesting
who
that-
controls
I'm not
this?
suggesting that's happening here, but I'm suggesting that can happen anywhere.
But other than the mayor, who controls this other person?
The mayor obviously has to control this person. I mean, who else would you expect to control this person?
And that was why I made the point that we need to define these same duties and powers and things, because council needs to have, as a check and balance, the capacity to remove that person, just like they can remove other directors.
No, you're
if they have
crossing over on
sufficient
that one,
votes,
Dave.
you know.
You're crossing over on that one. Listen, Peggy will attest to this because we're gonna talk about this a little bit. And, you know, back in the day, I was upset about the removal of a director in the city when I was then a councilman and or the president of council. And I introduced the legislation that caused that there be a confirmation by council to remove. And in hindsight, I think that was probably wrong. I think that you have to allow your administrator to administrate and your council people to legislate. And you need to have clear division between the two. And I think that we have eroded our city charter as well as I see it from the outside looking in. I think that we need to make sure that we redefine that. Now, if you are thinking that you want to have a weak mayor government, then we ought not have a mayor.
I'm not thinking anything.
I'm just
trying to
saying
learn.
though, that's my thought on this.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't make a difference who's sitting in that position But when you're in that position, and you have to deal with the issues that you have to deal with in a day in and day out basis, you need to have the ability to be able to maneuver. And I'll give you an example, you may be upset with me when I say this, but I have nothing against the finance directors. Bob, I thought he was a nice guy, in fact. But apparently he can't work with the mayor. Okay? And as long as that mayor is in that position, how do you go to work every day and sit with a mayor that you don't get along with? Or the mayor sit with him if he doesn't get along with him? It just doesn't work. Okay? You have to have the ability to have people in positions that you trust. And if you can't trust them, then you have to remove them. And you have to have the ability to remove them.
I understand what you're saying, and I agree with you to a certain extent, but I also think about this, the idea that the position of mayor, somebody running for that position that has taken, for example, a weak skill set in, perhaps finance, legal, and, maintenance. Very weak there, very little, maybe they were an accountant, and that's all they did was numbers, and they don't know how to do anything else in terms of running the city. Okay, I see value in this chief of staff or city manager type of organization because there's opportunity for continuity and professionalism, a much higher level of professional, qualified individuals operating the organization, whereas every 4 years, perhaps, we're getting somebody new that may not have a skill set across the board, and of course that's at the will of the people that are voting, of course. But I think there may be some value in thinking about this idea that somebody that is very qualified to run an organization and all the different functional areas of it, as opposed to somebody who comes in and worked as an attorney for their whole career, or an engineer for their whole
Well,
career.
there aren't any professional mayors.
No.
The people decide who the mayor is by their vote.
Right.
I don't support an assistant to the mayor. It's just another pig at the trough. Everybody has assistants here. Everybody's assistant has an assistant. And I think it's time to start scaling back on unnecessary employees. That's a big problem for us regular taxpayers, that a person that's been doing the job, no problems with the job, all of a sudden needs an assistant or two. It doesn't make, it's just, it's just too much for us regular folk. If you can't do the job, then hire somebody that can do the job, don't hire your friend. So I'm not gonna support having an assistant for the mayor now. Let the voters decide who the best one for.
I can appreciate what you're saying, and I'm not one for wasting tax dollars. I used to work in the Court of Common Pleas, and I used to say that if people realized who they were electing to the judicial system, they would cringe, and I think Dave probably can attest to that. And it's a name game, and somebody can get elected and go into office, and that person could be a total wacko, if you will, and be sitting in that position. And you need to be able to bring some, I don't want to say civility, but maybe some reasonableness and understanding of what that person's supposed to do.
Have we ever had that before with any mayors?
No, we have
We
not.
don't need it, as far as I'm
We've
concerned.
had a very,
If you're a crummy mayor, you'll get voted out. That's the safeguarding control.
I agree that if you're a bad mayor, you're gonna get voted out, but he's got 4 years to screw up the city.
No,
Well,
you can
no.
have recall, Joe.
Depends on how bad they screw up.
Joe, you had mentioned, since you mentioned our finance director, okay? I was sitting here, one of our ex-council person, who was a sheriff, and I won't mention his name, stood there. He called, and I'll find the evidence at home, he called where the old finance director came from. And the quote was from them, their gain was our loss. Now, what would that mean to you?
Listen, I'm not suggesting, I don't have no idea what his abilities were as an individual. Just on the basis of talking with him, I didn't have anything against him, so I mean, he was a fairly nice guy.
Well, let's see, the trouble is, like me, I've been doing this 40 years, I check everything out from the attorney. I had to file charges against him because under the law,
We shouldn't get into that,
This is
Chuck.
not,
Yeah, we
this
shouldn't.
is,
You
you
brought it
know,
up?
think
No,
about, he was
yeah,
just using that
I was
as an
just using an
example.
analogy, Chuck,
Okay.
not something that I really wanted to.
I think we've identified that we may be interested in discussing the assistant to the mayor. And some people have expressed that they are not interested, some people have expressed that they are interested, and some have expressed no opinion. So I think that's probably where we should leave it at, and then get organized and come back and address that at a later date. Is everybody in agreement with that? I think we discussed last time what Mr. Miglerini just brought up, which is, should council continue to have the right to confirm firings as well as appointment of directors? And I think Joe has not suggested that the confirmation of directors should be removed, but that certainly council's ability to, or requirement to council, a majority of council or whatever it is, support the firing. You'd like to have that removed from the charter. So I think that's an issue that we need to identify, and so that we can get organized to address those issues. Is everybody in agreement with that?
Well, can I ask one thing?
Sure.
Have you said that it will be, that this assistant will be picked by the mayor, or we can decide whatever we want?
We can decide however
Okay.
we wanna do it,
We're just
and I think it's
identifying
different.
areas.
I think the position I'm talking about is not really an assistant to the mayor. It is more of a chief of staff or a director of
But that's what it comes
administration.
down to, isn't it?
It comes more as a.
You got department heads that know their job.
Yeah,
Now
but it's
you
a
need
little
the
bit
department
different
heads
than
to tell
just
the
an
assistant
assistant.
to explain to the mayor.
It's not like an administrative assistant or executive assistant. It's more, it's somebody who has a little bit more authority based on the mayor's.
Well, that's what I was trying to explore here, was where, you
Yeah.
know, where, what we're really talking about. Forget the title, okay? But what are the duties and powers
Right,
of
and I
that
think we
person?
could outline those based on what we're talking about. You know, I've had the opportunity to work in a lot of different communities over the years, and I've certainly seen cities that are very high capacity, high functioning, and I've seen cities who struggle, and I think, not that I've worked out there, but we've read about the mayor and that they had experience in Richmond Heights recently, where she recently went through a recall, and people were appalled by some of the things she did. She obviously didn't have the background skills or capacity to run a city the way that the residents, even though she got elected, there was an issue there. And had she had maybe a director or something, maybe it wouldn't have happened, I don't know personally, but I certainly know it was a disaster for that city. And if we could avoid something like that in our city, I think that would be important.
I guess, think about, in terms of being just like operating a business, okay? If you're gonna go in and you acquire a new business where you assume operation of a business, it's much easier, I would think, if you're the mayor and you got elected, newly elected. If you've got a guy already there doing a very good job of operating the place, and it's running efficiently and effectively, then, it makes your job a whole lot easier. That continuity, I think, has some merit.
Well, when you're the CFO
We're
or a
only
company
12,000 residents.
or a
too, so we gotta
CEO.
keep it in
Yeah,
perspective.
keep it in perspective.
You know what you're successful when your bottom line increases every year, but when you're the mayor, how do you measure success? How do you measure capacity?
I think you
being a
establish
mayor?
metrics the way any other organization does.
By what?
We've never done that.
I know, but how would you do that?
I
By
could give you tons of
Tax-
examples outside of here, but it's not
taxes,
charter stuff.
quality of life, public services?
You start by identifying what your deliverables are, and then you look at, are
But
you
it's not
efficient
that
in
easy in the
delivering?
government.
I didn't say it was. I just said there's countless examples and there's ways to do it.
Well, I'd just like to see somebody who is, no matter who the person will be in the future, that we have a high functioning, high capacity city.
All try to move on so we can try to get back on, get this organized so that the next couple meetings we can really start working on. So I think we've organized the confirmation, firings or hirings, however you want to do those. I know that last time we discussed the veto, two-thirds veto, because right now with a veto of, to override a veto, two-thirds, it requires 4 out of 5, which is way more than two-thirds. And I think we had identified that that was something we wanted to take a look at. So that's gonna be on the list. So, looks like we're ending up with the mayor. Any other changes that you wanna see in the section for the mayor's powers?
I would like to, I don't think we had a chance to talk about like 201. It says like executive powers
Did you
of
see the
the
line in
201.
Okay.
The mayor shall be, he shall be the Department of Public Safety. I
Okay.
think that should be may, or council may appoint a public safety. The mayor may appoint someone else to be the public safety director. I don't think it should be a guarantee that the mayor do it.
There's someplace else.
There's another
Yeah,
section.
there's
another
another
section.
section where it says,
Okay.
and by ordinance council.
Yeah, they can take that position away.
I know, but this says shall be.
Well, he shall be until such time as council then.
And those are, I believe,
You
exact
actually,
words.
you
Right.
actually had, back to 201, you had actually recommended that the line, subject to the provisions of 801.
801?
Okay, you said, you questioned that, you head of the public safety, you're questioning whether it's in conflict with 801, and then you suggest that perhaps, because they're two different sections, and one's, you question 3011, be the head of the Department of Public Safety, is it in conflict with 801? And then you suggest that perhaps it be amended to read, be the head of the Department of Public Safety, comma, with the language subject to the provisions of 801. In other words, that he would do that unless things changed and he went to 801. And 801 says by ordinance, council can do that. And 802 gives what the job description would be for the safety.
Okay. I could just see that could be a huge conflict if council decides we wanna have somebody else and the mayor says, well, I wanna do it. You
Peggy,
know,
excuse me.
No, because you can override them though, Peggy, at that point.
the council could.
Sure.
As far as the safety director is concerned, and I got this, I called Columbus and I got the documents and all, unless the person is certified by the state of Ohio, okay, he is safety director in name only. Don does not have an authority if there was a tornado here or anything, because he's not certified by the state. So in other words, if you wanted to be the safety director other than the mayor, there's a form you gotta go through all the,
I know, what
so our safety director has no authority.
then maybe just however we should clean up some language.
Yeah.
I'm telling you what, well, you wanna argue with the
It's on-
state?
it's on
I'll call the
It-
state
it's-
again.
Is there some thought that we wanna have a certified safety director?
Well,
I think
I
that's not
think
what I was
in-
asking.
first of all, I think that the authority of the mayor is that the mayor is the chief enforcement officer of the city, period, okay? Whether you like it or you don't like it. And as mayor, he has the ability to call out those in conjunction with his chief of police and chief of fire in the safety force arena. So he has that ability to say, okay, we have a tornado coming, we're going to evacuate an area. That's going to happen based on the mayor saying it's gotta happen.
You're wrong, Joe, call the state.
I think it's, what it said, what it means is, according to even Twinsburg, the safety director is just a title that the mayor usually takes over without any pay.
Until the
Any-
position is formally established,
Right.
then there is state criteria
Right.
that defines.
The only, the service director knows all about accidents on purposes and all that. I guarantee you that if you ask the mayor what kind of poison gas tennis balls give off, he's not gonna know the answer to that. But Chief Black's gonna know the answer to that. So you can't depend on the mayor being service director other than a figurehead that will say, okay, Chief Black, we got a bad fire, what are we doing? Okay, we'll do that. I hope that's what he'll do,
Well,
since he has no
I would
knowledge.
certainly expect him to do that.
Right, but a certified safety director doesn't have to ask anybody.
Right.
They're usually a retired fireman, with a lot of skill, or a policeman, usually a fireman. And they know
I
everything.
guess I'm just saying though that the powers of the mayor are, he's got that, he holds that title, so he has the ability to dictate whether he's certified or not. Now, I mean, you look at an issue, Chuck, from the state of Ohio and saying certified, but in the way our charter is set up is that the mayor holds that position.
Joe, you've not been along, you know, I got my nose in everything. Right now, our mayor cannot tell the chief of police or the fire chief or anybody, chief of police, I want 6 men on days and 3 on second. This has happened in the past. They've told him, I ain't gonna say where, to go pound salt. If he is certified safety director, you will. You've been way too long, Joe, I'm sorry.
Well, I may have been way long, but I can say this though, that if the mayor says we're gonna have 6 guys on duty today, we're gonna have 6 guys on duty.
You wanna bet?
Yes.
Okay.
I think though that maybe
I
we
mean,
need
that's,
to.
but Chuck, that's the dictates of the budget, and I gotta tell you, the police chief and fire chief would be more than happy to accept that. You're probably having a bad analogy there, but the fact is that the mayor is the chief enforcement officer of the city. You have to have somebody that is in that position that can be that person. You can't have a department head then just running off and deciding he's going to do what he wants to do. You just can't have it. It just doesn't work in this system.
It goes even further than what you're saying. I mean, you're spot on, and here's the thing. The state Ohio Revised Code does apply until the city establishes a charter and defines their own criteria, which is why we're all sitting here right now, because we have defined that criteria, and that criteria is different than what the state has. He is empowered to do that, and it is different, but there's many other places where our charter, our ordinances, and our statutes are different than the state's. But that's because we have our own charter, and we are a municipality.
I don't think a city of 11,000 people is going to hire their own safety director. Doesn't make sense for 11,000 people at a salary of 100 plus.
Yeah,
But if we could get the other Nordonia Hills community together and all of them hire a safety director and all of them share in the cost, that would be a fabulous thing, but it's not going to happen.
Right.
Right now, it's not going to happen.
I think there's some things that we're not understanding relative to the changes that have happened since 9/11 and with Homeland Security and with FEMA and with the Emergency Management Association down at the county. Even though we're a city, we still work with the county, EMA. Also, for example, if we had the flu epidemic or some Ebola crisis or something, actually, the director of health, the county takes precedent over police chief, fire chief, and everything. So I'm guessing we're not understanding, this term has probably been in there since the beginning of the charter, and that we maybe should check with Chief Black or Chief Bolden and see what their understanding is. Maybe we don't, since we have it in 2 places, maybe we don't need to. I wasn't thinking of that when I said that as being a different position. I was thinking, or a full-time $100,000 position, that's what I was thinking of. I was thinking more of the responsibilities. You know, that person may appoint the police chief to serve as also the public safety director in addition to their current jobs, or the fire chief, or one or the other, or something like that.
So there are
That's what I was
safeguards
thinking.
with the mayor.
And I don't think we need to do, I was just, right now, I didn't see any flexibility in that language. 801 does show some flexibility. I don't know, I was just bringing it up, but.
And Peggy, if you look at 564,
564.
line 564, you'll see the language about on such time as council decides it's time for that position. But I agree with you. In fact, you know, it's interesting, we've sat here for, what, 45 minutes already, now close to an hour. We've been talking about 3 new positions, each at about $100,000 a year, and we got chuck holes all over the city, you know? I'd much rather see that money spent filling chuck holes than adding staff.
My point was not to add staff.
Yeah, well, I understand.
Okay. Do you think we can move on?
No, but I do want to go on the record and say I do support Joe's position on, I do think that we should really seriously give consideration that council does not remove department heads. It's just a better structure.
Okay, well, you know, I'm obviously gonna disagree with that.
I know.
Maybe we don't have to
okay.
talk about it. There. It's on the list to be dealt with. So, as we're working in section 3.3, duties and powers of the mayor, anything else that you'd like to discuss before we move on?
Well, I know I did talk about this last month, even though I can't remember everything, is line 226. I know I did bring that up, and I would certainly like to have a further discussion about that when it's appropriate, about the council president running the council meetings.
Oh, yeah, right, yeah.
Yeah, you did mention that.
Are we on 302, Dave?
Not yet.
That was line 226.
We're gonna get there. We're on line through 226,
Okay,
which is the president of council should run the council meeting.
okay.
I think we did discuss that. I kind of agree with that. I don't know if anybody has any more discussion about it now, other than the fact that we want to consider that. Joe,
Well,
what's your thoughts?
Mike, you know, I had suggested back at the time when the charter was being changed from 7 council members to 5, that we needed to.
6.
I'm sorry, 6, I'm sorry. 6 to
Really? I'm the one that can't keep
6
focus.
to 5. That we had a total reform, if you will, of what the duties were of council people versus the mayor's position. And if all other things were going to be done to divide that power, then I would agree with that particular issue, where you put the mayor on. But I think it needs to be done in conjunction with all of the other issues that we have to deal with. For instance, well, giving the mayor the ability to administrate without tying his hands. You know, you set a budget, you let him hire, you let him fire, you let him do this, you let him do that. And if it is that council wants to run their council meetings, set the mayor aside, because we've already done that in a sense already. I mean, when we changed this form of government this last time out. So, but we need to create the divisions between the two, the legislative and the administrative arms of the city.
What
Regardless of who the mayor is.
I think what's being proposed is consistent with what you just said, though.
Yeah.
Dividing them is what's being suggested. As opposed to having the mayor preside over council, council presides over council, and the mayor administers.
I agree